Let's quickly go across to our special panel joining us on this discussion on DD India. Let me welcome Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharya, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs of India. Thank you very much, Ambassador Bhattacharya, and also welcoming Professor Swarn Singh from School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Namaste, sir. And Ambassador Bhattacharya, so can it be seen as a rare victory for diplomacy in the Middle East, and credit for which goes to Biden administration, the outgoing Biden administration, aided by France?
Well, I think this particular ceasefire was long overdue. We've seen the situation of war continue for about 14 months now. And the Biden administration had been urging the Israeli side to cease fire, both on the Lebanese side as well as in Gaza. We are very happy that this ceasefire has been announced, that an agreement has been reached, and we hope that the sides will implement it effectively and it will lead to wider peace in the region. But let us be very clear about this, that the tensions in the region are not over because the war in Gaza is still continuing.
Mm-hmm. Right. How do you see the mediation brokered by US and France, Professor Singh? Your take?
I agree with Ambassador. Given that the hopeless situation that has continued for over 14 months, any such indication of a ceasefire is a positive sign and therefore is drawing a lot of welcome remarks from world over. India has also welcomed it. United States taking lead is also a good sign, because United States is a primary actor, a major influence in the way Israel has conducted this conflict, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. But remember that this is a ceasefire which is already having reports of violations. So one has to be a little cautious. It talks of 60 days. And of course, we know there is a caretaker government in Lebanon. There is a great opposition inside Netanyahu's government. National Security Minister is threatening that his party will withdraw from the coalition. So in that sense, if you compare to the 2006 ceasefire with the Hezbollah in Lebanon, where again the same exercise of Lebanese forces occupying space closer to the border was agreed upon, but of course Hezbollah came in better. And as Ambassador said, only about 3,700 plus people have died in this particular conflict. 50,000 people have died in Gaza, and that ceasefire does not even touch about the... There are different interpretations as of now on both sides.
Now, this is also, sorry, I'm interrupting you here, but now there are two questions to this now, which are open to interpretation. Now, this is for both of you. Ambassador Bhattacharya, you first. US envoy talks about this ceasefire being permanent, quote unquote, but there are reports which talk about the withdrawal for 60 days. The bottom line here is, Ambassador, that are we looking at a permanent cessation of hostilities, especially, we don't know what happens to Gaza, but at least this one?
Well, on the Lebanese front, I think the terms of the agreement seem to be rather clear, though we don't have a comment from the Hezbollah yet about this. And as you know, Nabi Berri had kind of interceded on their behalf, since the Hezbollah was not directly involved in the negotiations. But essentially what they have said is that the Israeli forces will withdraw from the places that they had occupied in southern Lebanon within 60 days, and the Lebanese army will come into place and occupy those areas. And this has led to great hope amongst various quarters that the civilians can come back. And actually there are certain reports of some civilians wanting to come back to their homes that they had been dispossessed from. The concern in northern Israel, which is the area where Hezbollah was actually launching its rocket attacks, is that will this actually make this place safe for them? And many in northern Israel who are still not willing to go back. So I think these skirmishes have begun in some way. There were reports earlier in the morning of the Israeli army having opened fire at a group of people that they felt were close to Hezbollah. And then there was another incident in which 2 journalists were shot at. So there have been incidents already. But I think the idea is that this is a ceasefire. There isn't a timeline on how long the ceasefire will be, but 60 days is the time within which the Israelis will go back.
Okay. Professor Singh, now this is also seen as a major achievement, at least they are claiming to be, for the US in the waning days of President Joe Biden administration, and there is already this talk about Gaza next. Your take?
I fully agree with you in that lame duck presidency of Joe Biden. This can be seen as a clincher, and he's saying that this will be carried forward even for the Palestinians. Whether it happens within next 7 weeks when he's the president or will happen during Donald Trump's presidency is yet to be seen. But yes, it's a clincher. And that was possible, as I said, because United States has been the primary influence the way Netanyahu has carried out this constant onslaught on both Gaza and in southern Lebanon. But we were all seeing that Netanyahu was hardly listening to American presidents. But it seems that if there was any influence, of course, France and particularly United States were influenced. But there are a lot of hiccups, interpretations are different, and the core problem in interpretation of what is agreed upon right now is this. Israel believes that in case United Nations interim forces in Lebanon, UNIFIL along with the Lebanese armed forces is not able to ensure that the ceasefire is implemented in spirit and word as Israel will interpret it. Israel will have right to go and intervene once again, which is not acceptable to Hezbollah.
Okay.
So there's already a difference in interpretation. Second, while they were preparing for the ceasefire agreement, Israelis have really had enormous onslaughts on southern Lebanon, including parts of Beirut, flattening lots of these structures. So even if people want to come back, I'm not sure where they are going to come back in that sense.
Right.
And the old story of 2006, Hezbollah, will survive only if it stands as a force against Israel. If it moves north of the river, then it will have to find a political role in domestic politics of Lebanon, which is not how Hezbollah has survived and will survive. So sooner or later, Hezbollah will have to come again to the border of Israel.
Okay.
To stand as a force against
Okay,
against
all right.
Israel.
Right.
So a lot of hiccups as of now.
Right, sir. So, Ambassador Bhattacharya, the agreement which promises to end a conflict across the Israeli-Lebanese border, what's your sense also in terms of its sustainability, as pointed out by Professor Singh?
I think at the end of the day, Israel would wish to have greater security for its people. And to some extent, the kind of incursion that it had in southern Lebanon was not entirely successful in that particular endeavor, which is the reason why there was also great opposition within Israel to the kind of effort, the military campaign in Lebanon. The Israeli government had not been rather mindful of the suggestions of the Americans on Gaza. They have gone along with the Americans on this particular issue, particularly because the costs were high and the people of Israel were being affected and they wanted that war to end. As to what is going to happen subsequently, I think is really open to debate, because most importantly, Hezbollah has not been part of this particular negotiation. And so if Hezbollah were to come back to southern Lebanon and to reclaim that particular area, that security threat that Israel had and northern Israel has felt will happen again.
Okay. One final question, Professor Singh. Is this deal likely to enable Israel to focus more closely on the conflict in Gaza? We know it has vowed to destroy its long-time enemy, the Palestinian Islamist group, which led to October 7, 2023 attacks on Israeli communities and garnered international headlines.
Thank you, Sakal, for asking that. I think Israel had announced that it wants to eliminate Hamas from the very roots. It has actually eliminated much of the population from that part. But when it comes to Hezbollah, interesting it is that the national security minister, who is threatening to resign and take away his coalition ministers away from the government, is actually saying that Israel, in case of southern Lebanon, is in stronger position and should not make a ceasefire at this stage and should really defeat Hezbollah now. And in that sense, they have a very different imagination of what they're doing with. And Hezbollah is saying we are agreeing to ceasefire so that ceasefire in Gaza can also be initiated. So there is a kind of a indirect precondition which is being sort of attached from that Hezbollah side here. But we are all saying, at least in this desperate situation, any good sign is something to celebrate, and therefore ceasefire is something which is a good sign. But we have to be aware that there are going to be constant challenges, that whether this ceasefire will exist, survive, thrive, and get peace between Lebanon and Israel, and whether it will lead to any peace vis-a-vis Gaza. There is no mention of Gaza at this stage. So we hope that it makes Israel now comfortable, having virtually decimated much of Palestinians there, to think of some kind of ceasefire. But then ceasefire with who? Hamas doesn't exist according to Israel now.
Ambassador Bhattacharya, so final question, force giving way to dialogue and negotiation is happening in Lebanon. Can this be replicated in Gaza Strip?
And I think the Gaza negotiations have been going on for a long time and through various iterations. Just today, I think the Jordanian king and the Egyptian president made an announcement about the necessity for a ceasefire and the supply of humanitarian assistance. But more importantly, President Sisi of Egypt also had a conversation with the Qatari Prime Minister,
yes,
Al-Thani. As you know, Qatar had been very key, crucial player in the negotiations, yes, for a ceasefire in Gaza. Yes. There are also certain signs that the Turkish are probably coming around, right, to having a role. So I think the forces are coming together, but whether the Israeli side will agree to a ceasefire at this stage is something that only the Israeli side can say.
Egyptian President Al-Sisi, Jordanian King Abdullah, they've all called for an immediate end to war in Gaza as well. Well, on that note, we'll have to call end to this part of the discussion. Gentlemen, thank you very much, Ambassador Bhattacharya and Professor Singh. Such a pleasure as always talking to both of you. Namaste. Thank you.